It is a really strange time in Canada. We have almost half of the country blaming every issue that we have here on Donald Trump. That's stupid.
That term bootlicking, obviously it's a pretty visceral one. What do you think merits that?
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We've got former Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy, who is really never much of a politician, but he's calling Mark Carney a bootlicker. Takes one to know one, I guess. He's being coaxed along here by our favorite national propaganda machine. Let's take a look. This one doesn't seem to be so much in favor of Carney, but he's a liberal. I guess you can say whatever you want on CBC. Let's take a peek. No one is there to put this guy in his place.
Oh, yeah.
As talks drag on, Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach is drawing condemnation from a former Liberal Foreign Affairs Minister. In this Substack post, Lloyd Axworthy attacked Carney and other world leaders for capitulation to the U.S. president. Quote, "When do we stop pretending it's all part of some clever negotiating strategy that justifies bootlicking in hopes of tariff concessions?" Lloyd Axworthy, thank you for making the time. That term bootlicking, obviously it's a pretty visceral one. What do you think merits that?
I think the fact that it was an opportunity at G7 meetings, NATO meetings, to actually address some serious issues. I mean, the world is changing, we all know that. And rather than coming to the core of these issues, we end up sort of manufacturing mealy-mouthed communiques that say nothing. So issues, what's happening in Ukraine, Gaza, climate change, the whole kind of convulsion that's going on in terms of civilians being attacked around the world. And people expect their institutions to be serious. And what this was done, it was simply a way to try to create a kindergarten so that the child king wouldn't find himself sort of totally estranged.
Well, but I guess the question becomes, if indeed the consensus among the other world leaders at that table is don't upset the apple cart, what would you have them do? Because it's true that these topics, be it climate change, be it Ukraine, risk provoking a very powerful and unpredictable man. So what would be a better path to your mind?
Well, I think it should have started earlier. I mean, I think as soon as they have these so-called Sherpa procedures before these conferences, and everybody wants to draft something that tries to find an agreement. But sometimes you simply can't find an agreement. And with Donald Trump, it's impossible unless you play according to his rules and his standards. So I think that the obvious would have been to try to work around him, to simply say, you don't want to talk about roaring fires and intense droughts and starving kids in Africa, well, but we do. And that he leaves early anyway. I mean, he can't take more than 24 hours of dealing with his peers. So, I'm not trying to be sort of sarcastic about it. I'm simply saying we're in such an important defining role right now in the world, and that I think Canadians in particular felt liberated in a way in the election. It was a chance to start thinking about how much more independence do we have as opposed to dependence. Mm-hmm. And I think since then we're finding that we're kind of falling back into the same old rut.
Let's dig into specific examples, because you do talk about some of these things in your post. You criticized Mark Carney for dropping the digital services tax to get the U.S. back to the negotiating table. Now, the Prime Minister said earlier this week this was something Canada was probably going to do anyway in the course of the negotiations. It is a Justin Trudeau-era policy, but yes, one that Mark Carney has moved forward with. Do you think it would have been worth letting these negotiations that are so critical to Canada's economy end over the digital services tax?
Well, Catherine, if it comes to negotiating, you don't give away one of your cards. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do we get in return?
Back to we don't, I should say we don't know. In fact, we don't actually
know. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I think what is happening is that, I mean, I go back to 2018, mm-hmm. when Trump introduced aluminum and steel tariffs, and we retaliated. We got back. I mean, we put all kinds of constraints on about $16 billion worth of export. We're the largest export receiving country. Mm-hmm. We have some real muscle when we want to use it, but there seems to be just this tendency to sort of kind of tug the forelock and say, what can we do in front of this powerful guy? Well, powerful people you can go around them and you can challenge them and you can contain them. I think that's a policy right now, is to contain the damage he does, so that we're not turning on to other generations the destruction that he's causing.
Well, and so I just want to be crystal clear about this, because I think by and large Canadians, said in the last election, yes, stand up to Donald Trump, but understanding what that looks like, you would be then advocating for, in this instance, no, we're going to stand our ground on digital services tax. We said this is an issue of fairness with U.S. tech giants. If you don't like it, you can take a hike. The negotiations are over. And by the way, here are our steel and aluminum tariffs. And that foregoes the chance of a deal in the next, let's say, 2 weeks.
I mean, putting the experts aside, what is wrong with the country deciding to tax some of the largest gougers of the Canadian finances, destroying our local community newspapers, pushing people out of business, and not tax them for it? I mean, since when? And I think what we've established with that is a precedent. What happens now if next week, all of a sudden, major droughts happen further in the States, and Donald Trump says, well, I'd like a little part of that water you guys have, that sort of big sucking faucet up in north. I mean, you're setting precedents, and you're simply, every time you give in, you're simply providing another kind of incentive. I mean, when you have his press secretary coming up saying the Canadian Prime Minister caved, and it was a triumph for Donald Trump. Do you know who really reacts? And I got a lot of reaction because, I took my education in the States. I know a lot of people. They said, why did you give that guy another win? We have to stop him.
I'll ask you about NATO as well. Only Spain opted out of the 5% spending target last week. You said in your post, other world leaders, quote, sat clapping like trained seals. Again, this is a situation where there does seem to be consensus among the world leaders, yes, perhaps driven by Donald Trump. The United States may not be there to protect Canada in the same way that they once were. So if there is this international consensus, and if there is an acknowledgement of a need to be more self-reliant, again, I guess the question becomes, what ought Canada to do, if not go along with where so much of the world seems to be going?
But that's what disturbed me about the meeting. We're using 5% as the goal in itself. You're not asking to do what? What impact does it have? I mean, we're not talking about improving our diplomacy or our development, which are equally important tools to deal with the world and with the threats and the risks we have. And in fact, one of the concerns that I feel, and others do, is that in order to meet that kind of commitment, we're going to have to cut back on the very things that have made Canada a distinctive and effective international player. You
in fact, in another post, talk about, you say, what else will we quietly surrender? Cultural industries, environmental standards, agricultural security, Arctic sovereignty. Wait till Stephen Miller whispers in the presidential ear that Canadian immigration policy supports diversity. And I guess I wondered reading that, why you are not giving Mark Carney the benefit of the doubt. You talk about the fact that we don't know what's going on in these negotiations, but you are assuming that things could go quite badly for this country.
Well, here's my point. I understand the pressures, but Prime Minister Carney and the government have to be very careful that what they do doesn't put us into sort of a straitjacket and present us and limit our ability to continue to make changes and innovate. And that really means that we have to ensure that the decisions are the right ones. I mean, I went through debates like the free trade debate in '88, where we argued, said this deal is not a good deal for Canada because we give away too much. We have no idea what's being negotiated. And that's one of the calls I've made is I think Mr. Carney and the government should make it very clear that they may negotiate a deal, but they should not agree to a deal. They have to bring it back to Parliament. Let's have a debate. Let's have an openness. Let's have committee hearings. Let Canadians get engaged so that we feel we know what's going on.
And that assurance that the Prime Minister has been trying to offer, that there won't be a deal signed if it's not, you will get a deal if it's in Canada's best interest. If it's not in Canada's best interest, there won't be a deal. That seems to not be of particular comfort to you.
Wait. Who chooses the best interest? He said, okay, we're going to test this in the parliamentary system. That's why we have a parliamentary system. You don't rely upon one man. I think we're all getting a little nervous about leaders who kind of speak ex cathedra. You know, they're the only ones that have the truth. And Mr. Carney is a good man. He's an intelligent man, but is the only arbiter of what's in the best interest of Canada? Isn't it? I mean, we've seen in the legislation the government's brought forward the indifference to Indigenous rights. We've seen the difference to civil liberties issues. We've seen the difference to the rights of refugees. That's not in the best interest of Canada.
Because we have you here, I am going to take a little bit of a turn and just ask you in closing about something else that has been so important in your career. You were the driving force behind the Ottawa Treaty, the global convention to stop landmines. And you have written, too, about the importance of Canada standing up for Ukraine. I believe you mentioned it earlier in this conversation. This week, Ukraine and 5 other European countries moved to pull out of the convention, citing the threat of Russia. They are, there's indications the United States is not going to provide them with the same sorts of equipment. There is a conundrum here, and I wonder what you would say about it.
Well, I'm very saddened because I think they're making a mistake, because once you start unraveling a treaty, it becomes a snowball. Other people start doing the same thing, and we're in an incredibly sort of delicate time where we've spent decades putting together treaties, arms controls, to try to restrain the use of force, to try to protect people's lives. And if we start unraveling it, we end up with a jungle. We end up with a Hobbesian world. And that, to me, I understand Mr. Zelensky's dilemma. Part of the problem is because I don't think Western countries, particularly the United States, is now living up to make them feel secure. So you have to give your public something. I mean, I've spoken to some of the ambassadors of these countries, and they said, this is a political performance thing. We have to show people we're doing something. And what's easy? Let's withdraw the landmine. There's been no evidence, by the way, Catherine, to show that what's happened in Ukraine has had much impact on the Russian sort of abilities or in their invasion. And that's why I think I come back to Canada. If one country should be working as a stewardship with these countries, it's Canada.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the discussion there. Appreciate your time today. Former Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It is a really strange time in Canada. We have almost half of the country blaming every issue that we have here on Donald Trump. That's stupid. We have a housing crisis, an immigration crisis, a cost of food problem. We had the carbon tax that sunk us, caused a lot of these issues in the first place. 10 years of Trudeau's Liberal government being advised by Carney, and now it's fucking Donald Trump that is the cause of all of these things? Bullshit, man. The Carney government is using him as a distraction. Elbows up, national campaign, sells us out the next chance he gets to the European Union or the WEF, maybe China, maybe the Russians, maybe Iran, whoever, maybe Donald Trump. But let me tell you, these problems existed long before Donald Trump came along, and the CBC sold that is what the reason is. It is hard to watch. They're brainwashing you, and I can see it in the comments that a lot of people, the brainwashing has taken full effect. It's fucking crazy, and it's very frustrating to watch. Pay attention to the independent journalists, or at least the YouTubers. Check out Moose on the Loose. He'll give you some insight into all this shit. It's frustrating, man. Donald Trump's the only problem Canada has. We're out. Canadian Looney, thank you very much for watching. Like, share, subscribe. It gets to you sometimes. People are being brainwashed, and it's their own tax dollars that are paying for it. Ugh, hard to believe. Catch you in the next video. Later, gang.
Oh, yeah.